Hey, hey, and welcome back to Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I worried about typical teenage stuff like who was going to ask me to the prom, would that zit ever go away, and how much trouble was I in for failing government class. What I didn't worry about was accidentally pissing off the ghost during PE class. You see, unlike Lee Williams High School in Kingman, Arizona, my high school was not built atop an old cemetery with bodies still in place. You see, Lee Williams High School sits atop grounds that were originally used as the Pioneer Cemetery from 1900 to 1917. In 1917, Mountain View Cemetery opened and no more souls were buried at the Pioneer Cemetery, and the land stood quiet and unused. That is until 1944, when the land was sold and the graves had to be moved. For a fee, of course. By that time, many families of the deceased were no longer around or not willing to pay the exhumation fee, and so the graves of some 250 souls remain behind. One such grave lost to time was that of Jenny Botters, otherwise known as Belgian Jenny, Arizona's wealthiest madam. While her early life is a bit of a mystery, she surfaced in July 1896 at Ellis Island, having arrived from Belgium with her 14-year-old son. From there they went to Chicago, where she enrolled her son in a boarding school, and Jenny left for Arizona. She arrived in Jerome at a time when there were very few permanent structures. In fact, those in the world's oldest profession were often called blanket because they plied their trade on blankets outdoors. Jenny, despite being an unmarried immigrant woman, secured a mortgage on 3 parcels of land and built a wooden building noted on paperwork as being a boarding house for women. But in actuality, it was the first permanently structured brothel in Jerome. She named it Jenny's Place. Over time, Jenny's Place, while not the only brothel in the area, became the grandest and finest brothel in Jerome. Jenny had a knack for the business. She did not charge rent to her workers, but provided them with shelter, protection, and medical care in exchange for a percentage of their wages. Business was booming, and Jenny was raking in the money. But several fires swept through the area in the late 1800s, and her wooden building went up in flames at least twice. Finally, after the 1898 fire, Jenny rebuilt her brothel with brick to withstand the test of time. The building is still standing today, in fact, as a gift shop. In 1903, Jenny had had enough of Jerome and moved to a new up-and-coming boomtown called Gold Road, which was about 2 miles north of present-day Oatman. There she set up shop once again and started raking in Gold Road's hard-earned money. It was in Gold Road that she got wrapped up with a man named Clement C. Lee, an opium addict and a drunk who threatened and beat Jenny often. Unashamed, she made no secret of this. In fact, she told everyone she met about her abuse, but sadly, no one did anything about it. One morning on September 3, 1905, Clement started drinking especially early in the day. He told everyone he met that he needed money to settle a debt and that he planned on taking it from Jenny. He got so riled up that eventually he wound up at Jenny's place with a pistol in his hand. He demanded the money, and she refused to give it to him. They began to tussle, and Jenny ran down the street, wearing only a nightgown, to get away from him. She only made it about 40 feet when Clement shot her once in the hip. She fell to the ground, and Clement shot her 2 more times.
So bye-bye, Jenny.
He then left to reload his pistol while Jenny lay dying in the street. No one came to help her. He returned sometime later to find that Jenny was still alive and suffering. He shot her 1 more time, this time in the head. He then shot himself and lay down next to her, expecting death to swiftly come and carry him away. Instead, the constable came and arrested Clement for murder. Jenny was buried in a lavish grave in the Pioneer Cemetery. Meanwhile, Clement stood trial for the murder and was convicted and sentenced to hang. His lawyer filed numerous appeals, and Clement often bragged that he would never see the noose. However, on January 18, 1907, his appeals exhausted, officers arrived at his cell and read him his signed death warrant. As they escorted him to the gallows, he must have finally realized that he would, in fact, see the noose that day. His legs got weak and he collapsed, hitting his head on a sharp edge of a jail cell. Bleeding profusely, he was only semi-conscious as guards had to carry him up the steps to the gallows. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, his sentence was carried out. Clement, too, was buried in the Pioneer Cemetery. In 1948, Kingman Junior High was built next to the cemetery site, and in 1957, Kingman High School was built on an adjacent property. The Pioneer Cemetery was soon forgotten. That is, until 2010, when construction to expand and combine the two schools was underway. Behind the bleachers of the football stadium, workers were digging a trench when they unearthed 11 grave sites. An investigation ensued, and they soon realized that under the football stadium were the graves of some 250 pioneers, graves that had been left behind and forgotten. Since then, students and faculty alike have reported eerie feelings, especially during games and graduations that take place on the football field. Allegedly, there is an apparition of a man in a bowler hat and a young girl who just wants to play. If you ask me, this is quite literally the true embodiment of team spirit. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Miss Kitty's Wild West Adventures. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell for notifications. And in the meantime, I'll catch you on down the trail. If you are being abused, remember you are never alone. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline to speak to an advocate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.